I'm here with Professor David Brat, challenger in the 7th Congressional District against Majority Leader Eric Cantor at the Dominion Club in Glen Allen. Thank you, Professor Brat, for taking a few minutes to speak with us.
All right. Thank you very much for having me on. Appreciate it.
Sure. Well, let's get right to it. Professor Brat, what's your beef with Eric Cantor?
Well, my beef goes way back, both politically and policy-wise. A couple of years ago, I ran for delegate slot and saw what the Henrico political machine does to opponents that they oppose, and that's not a pretty sight. But more importantly for the country is the fiscal environment we find ourselves in after the financial crisis. The housing market went bust, spread over in the financial sector. We've had basically 7 to 8 years of just subpar growth. And I thought for sure the congressional leadership, on especially the Republican side, would learn some lessons from the financial crisis. And nothing, right? No one, the crooks up on Wall Street, no one went to jail. And we all know what's going on. Our debt is up to $17.5 trillion. There's no fiscal discipline. The unfunded liabilities now are up to $127 trillion. If you go to the bottom of the U.S. debt clock and add up Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and the Bush prescription drug plans, that's $127 trillion we're passing the buck on to the kids I teach every day in the classroom when I teach economics. And so there comes a point where you just say, hey, we can do better than this. And then Obamacare is just stifling and crippling small business. I talked to all the small business people in my district, and everybody knows about the 30-hour work week and the 50-person cap on employment. And the escalating costs. They're all getting crushed by costs from healthcare and from regulation that's coming from D.C. And so I'm running as a free market guy. And so that's the biggest beef is Eric Cantor and the leadership. I do not honestly think they know what free markets are, right? And then equal treatment under the law. I got some problems with what Eric's doing. After the financial crisis, there was this bill going through called the Stock Act, Stop Trading on Congressional Insider Knowledge. And Eric Cantor single-handedly changed that bill so that spouses and family members could continue to do insider trading, right? You and I go to jail, right, for insider trading. This is insider trading based on congressional knowledge, but it's the same thing. And it just smacks of kind of a crony capitalist attitude up there. There's an arrogance that there's a special set of rules for the people up there, and then there's another set of rules for everyone down here. And you look at Obamacare, who gets exempted from Obamacare? Same kind of logic. Unions, Congress and their staffs, and big business gets exempted, and the small business doesn't. So, this country is founded on absolute equality and equal treatment for everybody, without exception. And I believe in that. That's the American dream, right? And so,
yes.
And so, right. So I've got a major beef with Eric across the board. He's voted for 10 of the last 14 debt ceiling increases. This past January, he was one of only 28 Republicans that voted for the debt ceiling increase. Let me say that again real slow, right? You can sink in. He was only one of 28 Republicans that voted with all the Democrats for the debt ceiling increase. And so the spending is run amok. It's good news right now, they say, that we have only a $500 billion deficit, right? It's been $1 trillion every year. And we're passing that load on to the kids as well. So I think we can do better, and I'd like to be that new leader that puts the fiscal house in order.
Now, Professor Brat, you said Leader Cantor is secretly in favor of amnesty. What evidence do you have to support that claim?
Yeah, if I misspoke and said secretly, he's been pretty out in the open. I mean, he's been in favor of the KIDS Act, the DREAM Act, the Enlist Act. Most recently, under the Defense Authorization Act, he had the idea of allowing illegal immigrants to enlist in the military. And just think about that for a minute. So folks who aren't even citizens yet get to enlist in the military as a means to become citizens. And so non-citizens are holding the highest honored office in the land. Doesn't make sense to me. And then on the amnesty card, it's a matter of motivation, right? I teach third world economic development for the past 20 years. I love all people. I went to seminary before I did my economics. And so you look at the motivation. Why is Eric pushing amnesty? It's not a big issue in our district. Everyone's opposed to it. And so why is he doing it? And the answer is because he's got his eye on the speakership. He wants to be speaker, and big business, right? The Business Roundtable and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce wants cheap labor. So he actually is selling out the people in our district. He's not representing the district, the will of the people, and he's getting big paychecks by doing so. And so he's very clear on amnesty until 2 weeks ago when he all of a sudden discovered my polling numbers are rising in this primary, June 10. And all of a sudden he's against amnesty, and he's the harshest critic of amnesty, and has stiff language in these false flyers he's sending out every day to our constituents.
Okay, moving on. What specific legislation would you have voted differently on than Leader Cantor?
Yeah, a few big pieces. The number one solution I think that will systematically solve what's going on up in D.C. right now is term limits. And so I'm going to term limit myself to 12 years. I'll put a bill in to term limit everyone else to 12 years. That's one huge difference. I promised to put in a bill for a fair tax or a flat tax. And those are big reaches, right? Those are tough bills to pass, but in the more practical realm, I would have voted for Dave Camp from Michigan. He put in a Reagan-esque tax bill this past year that had two tax rates, 25% and 10%, and CBO said it would have raised our economic growth by a full 1 percentage point. That's huge in economic growth terms to get another percent, and Eric Cantor and the leadership said no to it because it would have ended some deductions on K Street, right? So the lobbyists wouldn't be happy. And so Eric Cantor, again, represents the crony capitalist guys up in D.C. and not the people. We would love to see a flat, lower rate and more economic growth in the future, and our leadership said no to that, and that's shocking.
Well, that leads me to my final question, Professor Brat. How would losing the second highest level Republican in America help the Virginia delegation?
Right, and that is the right question. It actually would help, right, because Eric is in a powerful position, so you have to ask yourself, is he using that power for good ends or for bad? And in my view, he's using that power against the very people in the district he represents. And amnesty is the biggest example of that. But the tax bill I just discussed, there's no Democrat challenger in this race at all. It's an open primary. And so I get that question, and so the relevant comparison isn't Eric Cantor versus me. If Eric Cantor's not in leadership, we may get another person like Jeb Hensarling or something else, the strong conservative leader up there in the Congress that gets us more toward free markets and toward equal justice under the law. And so there is no loss. If you get rid of the crony capitalist leadership of Eric Cantor, you'll get flatter rates. We'll finally get rid of some of these crony deductions. We won't have TARP bailouts anymore. We won't have No Child Left Behind and all this top-down planning from the top. The other, in general principles, I'm going to follow the 10th Amendment and try to bring everything as much as I can from the federal level back down to the state level. And so that'll be a significant change in emphasis when I'm in Congress.
Well, that is very interesting, Professor Brat. Professor Brat, thank you very much for your time. I wish you luck on the upcoming primary on the 10th.
Awesome. Thank you very much for having me on today. Appreciate it.